So, recently I've been researching one character in particular, and for some reason this character um, it won't let me go. He really, I think, wants me to say something about him. Often I feel this way with characters I'm researching. I feel like I'm literally like almost contacting them in some way, or even more than that they're contacting me. I often get this impression, even with musicians that have come to find me. Yeah, I literally consider them finding me and not me finding them. Sometimes I just feel like it's a voice that's like screaming. Not necessarily screaming. I don't know how to even describe it. It's just, I sometimes don't think, it's the artist finding us. It's not us finding the artist. Sometimes they need to be heard just as, a lot of people seem to think, oh, I need to hear this artist, but a lot of times the artist wants to be heard just as much as as you want to hear them. They want to be heard, obviously, but I think we don't think about that sometimes, but and this is particularly true, I think, with some older artists who vanish from the radar for a large amount of people. And one of these characters, who I think has largely, who's going to stick around, I hope, but and really is such an interesting character to study from this viewpoint nowadays. And I think his personality says so much about the modern rock culture, especially in my take on it, because a large part of, and I've said this before in many other videos, but a very crucial part of my journey within the rock world was my mix of my literary travels along with rock and roll. Obviously, my obsession with Dylan it says a lot about this. I mean, I would say that he is perhaps the most literary character of the entire rock and roll world. Perhaps the most literary. I can't think of another artist who is as literary as, like Dylan in that sense. He was very literary minded. I can't think of another. You'll find the odd. For instance, I covered a song on here, Hemingway's Whiskey, where Guy Clarke made a reference to, going off topic from the initial artist I wanted to discuss, but I'll tie it in. I made a reference to Guy Clarke. All right, so Guy Clarke wrote a song called Hemingway's Whiskey, and this was covered by some, one of these new. A lot of people have this complaint when you look at the new country culture. The new country songs, almost, to me, don't seem anything. I like the old ones, I suppose, because they're old. I feel like I'm going way back in American history, so I dig that. With Hank Williams and even Willie Nelson, he's been alive for a damn long time now, that dude. So, you go far back enough, and Willie even takes you way back into history. Who else? There was so many of them. It's almost hard to even think all of them off the top of my head. Conway, Twitty, these names, these old country names. And, the thing about country songs, though, is, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand about Dylan in particular when it comes to why he was so literary, is, at least it's by how, the media judged it and looking at other acts, when we look at that period of music and we go back and look and really examine the 60s and really why was Bobby so revolutionary, and it can be hard now to understand what was so, a lot of people would listen to him, I think, and they're just they really, and I said this in another video where I was ranting about how no one understands Dylan. Well, it's because people are listening to him and they don't understand. I notice it's with a lot of things now. For instance, I have a younger brother. He's 16 years old, and I asked him the other night. I said, I assume when you go to school, a lot of kids are hip hop fans, And he said, yeah, of course. Hip hop is the big deal now. And I said, well, do you think any of them, or do you yourself, do you know where hip hop began? And he just said, no, I don't. Where the hell did it begin? Or when it began. I find this baffling. For me, I want to know when I'm listening to a piece of music, a genre of music. I want to know where did this genre begin? I want to know how did it begin, so on and so forth. I think that it helps me appreciate the music more, to critique it more, certainly, to find my place in it, in the world, in the universe of the music and the genre and all this, So anyways, with country, and with the artist I initially wanted to discuss, who's an author, as I said, when I first started this video. Now, with country, I know it's so hard to talk to a camera you don't know. And I'm not an orator. I'm certainly not a skilled speaker, one could say. But I'm getting better every time I make one of these videos. But, country music is kind of really, it's like, you take the Mellencamp song Small Town. We can't really, that was a great song, but like how many people from the world at large can really understand it, right? It doesn't go across. So, the other video cut out. This iPhone is awful. There's all the memory is used, and I don't know how or why. But so I can only really make like 5 or 6 minute videos, and then they cut off out of nowhere, and then I have to start a new one. So let's start a new one. All right. So I was saying about country music, and I was referencing in specific John Mellencamp's song "Small Town," and I was kind of critiquing it, and I was saying like, when he wrote that song, obviously he wrote it with a really specific audience in mind, and that was like people who grew up in a small town. And right away, he cut himself off from a huge segment of the population. And I think that for any songwriter, and certainly when I was trying to write songs, and I don't think I was too good at this sometimes, and once you so like forget about how awful the quality of my songs were on this site. Forget about all of that, and just think of the lyrics when you're trying to write a song. I mean, you want it to reach a lot of people, and I think part of the problem now is the songs that we see that are reaching people, and Small Town kind of is. You could identify and use the song as an example of like almost a problem song in some way. Is the fact that you're only able to really reach so many people, and another thing, and again with Dylan, so what he does is, Mellencamp really, in my opinion, he's older now, and he tries to, like I read an interview with him, I even have part of it like pasted up on the wall, from the New York Times, I remember like a couple years ago now, where Mellencamp made what I would call a very subtle dig towards Bruce Springsteen, and he said, and certainly a huge dig towards Mick Jagger, where he said that he didn't believe that he didn't want to be a rock star anymore. He wanted to be like an artist. So he said something along these lines. Don't quote me exact on it, but he said something along these lines, like he didn't want to be a rock star anymore. He didn't want to be like blasting the music, because Mellencamp's a middle-aged guy now. He's mellowed out. He's probably kind of tired. And he doesn't want to be running around the stage, with the fist pumping and all this, screaming. And you see with his shows now, like if you watch some of his performances, I mean, they're beautiful performances. I love them, because I prefer the acoustic act, really, a lot of the time. And he just plays the acoustic guitar, and he sings Small Town, and he sings Jack and Diane. He sings all those great hits, which were rock and roll hits, man. And he sings all of these with just the acoustic guitar and his voice. And I do think that a lot of the fans who show up to the concert are like, what is going on here? We paid to come in here and listen to, Jack and Diane the way it was recorded. And a lot of fans cannot disconnect the recording from the artist. So, and Mellencamp said he doesn't care at this point, because, he got the brass ring, and, he got what he needed, so he's okay, and he doesn't really need to, I think he's happy with what he has. He's happy with the audience he has. Who the hell wouldn't be? I mean, I'd be thrilled if I woke up tomorrow, in those shoes. But, taking it away, we look, and he said that he wants to be more like John Steinbeck. He's referencing an author here, and that's very much in line with what Dylan has always been trying to do, in my opinion. Dylan has always been trying to resurrect these old author sorts. He's always been in cahoots with I think, especially in my opinion, with the old author sorts. Dylan has always been one stone's throw away from being the same sort of titanic figure, such as Hemingway or Faulkner or Steinbeck in our culture. And I think that, and obviously they are huge, titans in our culture because they wrote these books that like we're still, referencing and reading in school and all this yada yada to this very day. So obviously these are very huge, influential artists, and they're also very, very serious. And this is what we see that we don't really notice happening in music anymore, is this notion of the musical artist being a very serious character. What we see instead now is that and this is where in the other video, I don't know if you did watch that one, that's why it's such a shame that I had to make a new one, but in the other video I was beginning to reference an author, and I never mentioned his name, but his name was William Seward Burroughs. Now, he's a very controversial character, but he was an author who had some prominence and stature in the rock world, particularly the rock world of like the 70s and the 80s and even into the 90s. He lived to be very old, this man. Now, what I'm trying to connect here is I'm trying to say how rock had a foot in the literary arena for a while. I mean, if you look at some of those old rock stars, some of them had like huge literary ambitions. You look at, obviously Dylan released a book at one point. Johnny Cash wrote a book. A lot of people don't even realize this. Johnny Cash actually later in life tried to write a book. He did. Well, he didn't try. He wrote a book. I think he had a deep faith in Christianity. So I think he wrote a book about a saint or something. I've never read it, but I bet it's good. I bet it's real good. He wrote a book about a saint, and so Dylan wrote the book, Cash wrote the book, and who else wrote a book that I'm trying to think? I mean, of course, Keith Richards did, but that was so late and it was only about himself, so it doesn't really apply. Oh, and then Patti Smith, this really huge woman figure in the rock world that we always see. Patti Smith, she has written a couple books, and I think she's even coming out with another one. So we see in that older section, that older stratosphere of the rock stars, very connected with the literary crowd. And I feel that this is something we're just not seeing anymore and haven't seen for a while. Now I'm going to start this video over again because I'm afraid I'm going to start a new one because I'm afraid it's going to stop. So, third video, bear with me, please, really, I'm trying to spread my wings and fly here. Alright, so third video. Alright, so I was trying to say about how there's something happening now that I feel we don't see. There's something that used to happen, rather, that I just feel we don't really see anymore in the rock world, which is the connection of the rock world with the literary world, or at least even poetry. Like, I have 2 books here now that I went and grabbed off the bookshelf to show you. I recently acquired these books. This is Sam Shepard, and this is Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Now, in the old rock world, these names make appearances. These books were not accidental purchases for me. These were very, precise purchases. I wanted these 2 authors specifically because they are huge. They are big names. They make honorable mentions in the rock culture, and especially in the story of Dylan, in Dylan's story. Shepard, for number 1, makes an entrance in. This is another interesting thing that I find. Now, I'm going to show you. What I find fascinating is how all these characters that I'm looking into here are all connected. For instance, Sam Shepard connects with Patti Smith, having dated her at one point. And so they are connected as artists. They created together at one point. And he also connects with Dylan because on the Rolling Thunder Review tour, which in my opinion, the Rolling Thunder Review was hands down, literally, the greatest tour that ever took place on American soil of any artist, in my opinion. I think it was the greatest tour. I could go on about it. I didn't even friggin' see it, man, but I think it was the greatest tour that ever took place. Dylan was in his weirdest, most awesome period then, as far as I'm concerned. I think that was incredible. When I watched those videos, I was never more inspired in my life by the way, what I saw on that tour. But anyways, so... And Ferlinghetti, of course, was just, a huge poet out of San Francisco, and he was an Italian, so, I gotta give him props for that. So where am I going with this? Well, what I'm trying to say is, And of course, I mentioned Burroughs. I mentioned William Stewart Burroughs in the second video, and I was still, who the hell would be following? I don't know, but I mentioned him in the second video. So these guys are all connected, and that's what I find so interesting, because these were strictly like Shepard. Besides having dated Patti Smith, has made his own name in the artistic world, being a playwright. So immediately, like, what would a playwright be doing with a rock and roller? I just feel like these days you don't think of that as being connected. In my opinion, I think, and I was trying to say about how the rock character was seen as a serious figure years ago, telling us something really serious. I mean, really even think of some of those old rock songs, even ones that were really popular. Like, look at American Pie by Don McLean. Those lyrics, and that song is you can see the Dylan influence all over that song, as far as I'm concerned, because it's very literary, lyrical. That song is it's like a little book, a little poem. It's like a little short story. And you just don't see this anymore. You don't see lyrics so masterfully written. That is not written easy. I certainly, in my opinion, have never written anything as close to that. That is up here. Like, you're trying, when a young songwriter is starting out, that is the song that he is trying to write. That song is an epic. It's literally an epic. I mean, in my opinion, it's totally on par with like all that old Greek stuff by like the guys named Homer and everything, Virgil. It's totally on par with that. I think people will be studying that song 600 years from now when they want to learn about America. That song is so huge. And what's so awesome is that regular people were listening to that 30 years ago when it came out. Regular people, not highfalutin scholars. Regular people were listening to it on the radio. Who were these people? Is what I want to know. The older generation, and now the older generation has done a lot wrong. I'm not gonna give any older people who might stumble upon this. I'm not gonna give you guys all props. But when it came to some of those songs, I'm going to give credit where credit is due, man. And some of those songs were definitely of a higher value than what we're seeing today at all. Because what I think happened was, and it connects with how us rock and rollers, largely lost our grip on the literary scene, is that the rock figure became a joke, a mockery, in my opinion. And I might have said this before. She largely became a joke or a mockery. And we don't see, and actually, we just don't see the rock figure being taken as seriously these days. I really feel that way. I just think they're not taken as seriously. They've been pushed aside, and it's seen as a joke, and rock and roll is seen as something for kids. It's just seen as something for youth. Real, and not even 20s, but youth, true youth. And you look at a lot of the songs, and I do